Well, what we're working on today is a Ford F-150 2012 model. And what we've got here is a rough country suspension systems for the 2009 to 2018 F-150 2-inch leveling kit. Alright? And what the kit has in it is, for the front, it has these spacers on there and a bunch of bolts. Or for the rear, it's got blocks, and I'll show them later. Where we're at right now, and this is where I've kind of got to the point where I thought I needed to make a video, is we've got the driver's side A out, passenger side B out. Okay, so each spacer has an A on it. You turn it around, it has a B on it. Okay, if it's focusing, I hope it is. But all that does is change the orientation of these three bolts. Okay, one way they're in the front and one way in the back anyway. So get those things on there. The thing about this that I'm doing that's different, in which I'll go over in just a moment, I'm going to look at this. Now I've put the supplied nylon locking nuts on this, okay? I've marked it with some yellow pen to make sure that this is orientation for the driver's side, because that's the side we're on, driver's side. Alright, they're torqued down to 30 foot-pounds according to the instructions. It's got the 3 bolts through there. There's no washers or anything on the head of these. They just fit into the housing. Okay, now if you look down at the housing, you'll see that on the other side you'll use these other holes, and on this side you'll use these holes. You have to make sure you've got it in the right holes for your orientation. Now what I did different, according to the instructions, is instead of taking all this garbage off, CV axle out, I took off the upper control arm, the sway bar. I disconnected the brake hardware bracket here so that I could get some slack, okay? That's all I've disconnected. And then I disconnected the huge bolt for the shock down there and took the strut shock assembly out, alright? It was really tight. I have it held up with a hood strut rod, one of those hood things that holds your hood up. It doesn't take much to hold this up. It's kind of spring loaded, but it just needs to clear. It needs to clear the top of this. Once it clears this and comes out, you can get it out. Now, this is the part where it's going to get tricky. If it's a little too tight, I'm going to have to mess with it some. I've got a jack stand limiting the distance of the lower control arm because I'm only allowed so much. And then once these lines start getting too tight, I'm going to have to come up with another method here, but I'm pretty sure I can get it in there. And of course I won't be able to video it, but I'll show it part ways. Okay, well I got it in there. It's really close right there at the top. I mean, you got to turn it. You got to turn it a little bit and move it around, but I got it in there. Just had to give it a little push. We've still got some slack here. It's a little tension, but that's all right. I move this up some more, so it looks like it's going to go together just fine. I hope this helps someone out. This is the driver's side. I don't see any use in video on the other side, but I will get a video on the back. It'll be separate. All right, so when you add the spacer to the top, makes it a little longer, obviously, and I could get it in there, but I couldn't get the bottom in. I could get it in sitting right here, okay? And the only way that I could get it to where I could put the bolts in was to use the spring compressor and compress this a little bit. And I got a pry bar and push this thing over in there. And I'm not sure if it's worth the trouble doing it that way or not. But what that does for me, it avoids taking the tie rod in and the CV joint loose. I'm able to get it in without doing that, and that was my objective. It may not be worth the trouble for some people. If you don't have a spring compressor, then it may be better for someone else to do it a different way. But I was just trying to show doing this how to do it without taking the CV axle and the tie rod loose. Now, my other option was to take the bolts out, or at least take one bolt out of this lower control arm, maybe even both the bolts, to get enough space. But I didn't feel like it was worth the time and the trouble to do that. It was easier to do this and get it in. If you don't have access to this, if it's too much trouble to go get it, it may be worth it for you to take them 2 bolts out just to drop this down. You need to drop it down enough so that you can get the bottom of this strut tower brace just into this strut tower bracket here. So I hope this helps someone out. I may even do it different on the other side. I was just trying to do it with the least amount of special tools, and I wasn't able to get that through without this spring compressor. So let's see how it goes. I need to get this apart and get it back together and see how it looks. I managed to do it without taking the caliper off and all this stuff, so I'm happy with that. I mean, that's good enough. It might have been a little bit more trouble to do it without taking this CV axle and things all apart. So anyway, hope this helps somebody. So this is on the passenger side. I'm kind of doing a little different because I chose to use those spring compressors. So I put them on there and sucked it up a little bit and dropped it out. And when you drop it out, you can put this little this lift block thing on here on the top. It's plastic, okay? But when you put it on here, it's going to need to be flipped around because these three little bolts here are swapped around. So you have to spin this thing all the way around to get it to go with the B out on the passenger side, B out, okay, according to the instructions. But what that does is that lines up these holes in here and gets everything lined up properly. Of course, these here you put them in with a hand wrench, torque them to 30, and I use Loctite on all this stuff. I think it's a good idea. But on this side I'm going to do a little different because on the other side I wasn't too happy about it. And really, I just need to get it to clear up here at the top. That's where I need to get it to clear. And see, I have this held up with this hood strut holder. Doesn't take much to hold this little guy up. But I've got the spring compressed some, okay? And so now it's going to push out because of, obviously, it's a nitrogen charged shock. So it's going to push it up a little bit. So I'm going to need to prise it down some to get it to pop in, which isn't too big of a deal. Just don't be surprised when you do collapse the spring a little bit that it does stay full length all the time. So I'm going to see about pushing this thing in there. It's a little different than the driver's side, but I'm just trying to do it without popping the tie rod in and taking the CV axle out. All right. Around my ideas about how I was doing it and ended up putting the top in first like I did on the other side. And using the compression from the spring compressor, it compressed a little bit. I just got a pry bar and stuck it in that small little hole down here and popped this little guy